Hello and welcome to the news at 7, where we get to the heart of the day's stories and communities across Scotland. Tonight, a record number of Scottish children are living in temporary accommodation. Campaigners say more needs to be done to fix Scotland's housing emergency.
We still haven't woken up to the scale of Scotland's housing emergency. We still have politicians who talk about what they want to do, not get on with making the change happen.
Also on tonight's programme, as teachers take action over classroom disruption, we ask an expert why children are acting out in school. And Shetland's new spaceport takes another giant leap towards its first rocket launch. We'll also have all your sport. Lewis, what have you got tonight?
Well, Laura, it's a big weekend in Scottish boxing, and we'll hear from the man going for the British title.
Hello, I'm Laura McGee. Welcome to the news at 7. Today, we learned a record number of Scottish children are living in temporary accommodation. More than 10,000 have no permanent home. That's the highest number since records began more than 20 years ago. In a moment, we'll speak to the housing charity Shelter, but first, here's more from the News at 7's Richard Forbes.
Last May, the Scottish Government declared a national housing emergency in recognition of the number of people who were waiting for permanent accommodation. Extra funding and measures were put in place to try and increase the amount of available properties. Both the number of homeless applications and the number of those assessed as homeless has gone up. Of those seeking accommodation, a quarter were families with children. The statistics also showed that 9% of applicants had spent time sleeping rough. The Scottish Government says it's investing an extra £200 million to tackle the problem.
Where we're here today in South Ayrshire building new buildings, and we've got a good record on that. We build 47% more per head of population in England, 73% more than in Wales. We've also mentioned about acquisition funding. So acquisition allows local authorities to go and look at acquisitions. Properties are out there in the market which can be turned around very quickly.
Today's report also shows there were more than 10,000 children in temporary accommodation. That's the highest number since records began. Charities say that more needs to be done to prevent people becoming homeless in the first place, such as improving maintenance of existing properties and providing better access to financial support to let them remain in their current homes. Richard Forbes, reporting Scotland.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Assistant Director of the housing charity Shelter, Gordon McRae, and asked him for his reaction to today's news.
Well, for those of us at Shelter Scotland, today's numbers really reflect what we see every day. We see more and more people struggling to keep the home that they have. We see more people who experience homelessness staying in the homelessness system for much longer. We see what's offered to them if they present as homeless. We see what's been offered to them getting worse. The children are being placed in unsuitable accommodations, things that can be harming to their health and certainly their future life prospects. And we're seeing things like rough sleeping doubling in the last couple of years, things that we thought we had turned the tide on. And what it tells us is that we still haven't woken up to the scale of Scotland's housing emergency. We still have politicians who talk about what they want to do, not get on with making the change happen.
So how do we tackle it then? What do we do to make this situation better?
Well, 9 months ago, the Scottish Parliament and Scottish Government declared a housing emergency, and they promised to come forward with an emergency action plan. A month after that, ourselves, along with the third sector, the private sector house builders, the social sector house builders, the professional bodies, we put forward 17 things we felt could be done immediately. The number one thing was to reverse the devastating cut to the affordable house building budget. To the credit of the Scottish Government, that's happened. But now we're still waiting on the rest of that plan. It's 9 months later. We need a clear action plan. We need to know what the Scottish Government are promising to do. And we need to make sure that we don't just end in a Groundhog Day situation where we're back here every 6 months going, yet again, more record numbers of children in temporary accommodation.
Some action has been taken. The First Minister, John Swinney, said the eradication of child poverty is his single most important objective. And there's been £4 million pledged to tackle homelessness. That was announced in December. So what more needs to be done? Is that not enough in your opinion?
£4 million is to test a new way of dealing with prevention. So that's not going to touch the sides of anyone who's homeless now. That's about an aspiration for the future. And too often we think government talk about aspirations. They talk about what would like to happen, what should happen, what we are working towards. Meanwhile, at a local level, we are seeing desperation. We're seeing children and families really struggling, single homeless people being turned out onto the streets. So we need to move past the rhetoric and move into action. £4 million is a drop in the ocean at a time when there's record numbers of children experiencing homelessness. When the number of people becoming homeless is increasing faster than councils can close the cases, then we have a systemic failure. We have a system that is broken, a system that is biased, and the time for hand-wringing is past.
Gordon McRae from Shelter speaking to me earlier. Stay tuned. Later in the programme, we'll hear how Scotland's housing problems affect young people in care. Today, Scotland took another giant leap into space with the head of the new spaceport in Shetland saying it'll be ready for blast-off in July. Rockets launched from Unst will eventually carry satellites and other payloads into orbit. Today, MPs met in Westminster to get an update on the Shetland spaceport. Our correspondent Rajdeep Sandhu has more.
It's from this spaceport on Unst where rockets are expected to be launched later this year, with hopes it becomes the place to launch from in Europe. German-based company Rocket Factory Augsburg is planning a test flight later this year. But last August, during a test, an engine exploded.
Nobody was hurt. I was up there, I'm responsible for safety, and I was very chilled because I knew that there was no danger to human life.
The spaceport is expected to launch rockets from a number of companies, and there's optimism from this one.
Hopefully the stars will align and the queues might fall away, I don't know, and we might be able to find ourselves with a space at Saxiford Spaceport in the summer. We are obviously negotiating the bird nesting season and the windy seasons, but we still have an aspiration to be able to make that happen.
Last week, the UK government invested £20 million in another space company called Orbex. Its boss was questioned about pausing its own spaceport in Sutherland, saying it was a purely commercially driven decision.
Well, I made the decision that it made the most financial sense to pause construction at Sutherland for now, develop the capacity, so we have a permission for 10 launches a year from Saxiford so far, and then as and when more capacity is required, we can finish the construction at Sutherland.
While there were warm words from industry bosses about the support from government so far, there was also disappointment about the lack of focus on the opportunities there are in the space industry, especially as this government chases its economic growth agenda.
In Shetland, there's hope it will become a significant industry for the area.
So I see the potential for high-paid jobs and young people in Shetland is huge. And it's not just around their launch site, there's ambitions to try and develop downstream activity and processing data that will come from these satellites. So there's a lot of spin-offs possible.
After many years of work, this year there's optimism we'll see rockets in the sky. Rajdeep Sandhu, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
Thank you for joining us on tonight's News at 7. We have more to come, including new figures that show Scotland is still struggling with alcohol. We'll ask what's being done about it.
It's dry, clear and cold overnight with a frost for many, but that means lots of sunshine on the way tomorrow. I'll have a full forecast later in the programme.
Disruption in schools is a big issue for parents, teachers and pupils alike. Today, teachers at an East Dunbartonshire school took industrial action, claiming pupils face no consequences for abuse and violent behaviour. Union members at Kirkintilloch High School are refusing to cover extra classes, take trips or run additional activities. Let's speak now to educational psychologist Dr Carol Campbell. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. So how big an issue is this?
Recent research that was run from teachers, school leaders and education departments indicated that most children do behave well in school most of the time. However, it did also signify significant concern around behaviour in school, particularly around challenging behaviour and the application of consequences.
And what is that challenging behaviour down to? Do we know?
I think there are lots of factors that are involved in challenging behaviour, environmental factors like, for example, the pandemic, also things like child development, the home environment, but also factors like, for example, poverty, speech and language development. There are lots of factors involved in challenging behaviour.
And is that actually getting worse, or is it just a perception that things are getting worse?
There certainly is a perception that things are getting worse, and I think it would be useful to have more accurate recording of incidents and tracking of incidents longitudinally so that we can analyse the problem across years and also look at the factors that are impacting on that as well.
How well are schools dealing with this? Should they be taking a stronger stance? It seems sometimes that maybe they are quite limited in what they can do to perhaps discipline children who are acting out.
I think there are lots of things that can be done in terms of supporting challenge behaviour, and there's a lot that can be done around understanding the causes of challenging behaviour, but also in terms of supporting children who experience challenging behaviour. Things like the use of nurture, restorative approaches, the use of evidence-based approaches, high quality training for staff, supporting staff within the context and the environments, and having a look at all of the factors that surround that.
And how much support do you think teachers are getting in order to do those things, in order to help pupils in a more nurturing way?
Lots of schools are making lots of progress in this area, and they do draw from that wider support, like, for example, from educational psychologists, local authorities and from other professionals, and also consulting with parents and young people, because it is important to consult with them as well to make sure they have a voice in this and that they understand the problem and the issues around it and also are part of the solution as well. So there are schools making good progress, but teaching is a difficult profession and managing behaviour is a challenging task, so it's something that you continue to need to work on and that you continue to need to support and draw on all the supports that are around.
A lot of people are concerned about phones in school, people correlating the two things, children having their phones, maybe not behaving in the best way at school. Do you think calling for a blanket ban on phones would help the situation, or are they not correlated?
I don't think there's a direct causal factor between phones and behaviour. I think it's much more challenging than that. And the Scottish Government policy just now is to let schools decide, and I think that sounds more than appropriate, because for some schools this is not the major issue, and for other schools it is a barrier to learning and they are taking action. So I think it's the localised decision making seems to be the right approach.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us on the News at 7. Dr. Carol Campbell there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we would like to hear your story. Our email address is news7@bbc.co.uk, and lots of people have been getting in touch about behaviour in schools. Paul from Angus said, when I was at school, the belt acted as a strong deterrent. When it was banned, nothing was brought in as a suitable alternative. But Margaret from Glasgow says there's always been some sort of violence in our schools. Most of our schools are very well managed and very peaceful. And Alistair from the north of Scotland said, I resigned from my primary school because of the stress and anxiety. Well, let's get a roundup of the stories making the BBC News app in Scotland. The First Minister has said there must be no ethnic cleansing in Gaza after US President Donald Trump proposed taking control of the region. John Swinney called the idea unacceptable and dangerous. The replacement for Barlinnie Prison in Glasgow will cost nearly £1 billion, almost double the previous estimate. It's due to open in 2028, 3 years later than planned. And Scottish councils have been warned they'll have to make difficult decisions to cover a £100 million funding gap arising from a UK-wide increase in employer national insurance. For more information on all these stories, you can scan the QR code on the screen right now. It will take you to the BBC Scotland News app. Now, we all know that alcohol is one of Scotland's biggest and longest running health problems. And new figures published today show once again that Scotland has the highest rate of alcohol deaths in the UK. The News at 7's Havel Martin sat down with Laura Mann from Alcohol Focus Scotland to ask why it's such a difficult issue to fix.
I think it's important to note that these are just the kind of tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding the harm that alcohol is causing to our society, because the alcohol-specific deaths are deaths that can be wholly attributable to alcohol. If we were to look at alcohol-related deaths, so things like cancers where alcohol is a contributing factor, they're not included in these statistics. If we were to add those in, we'd be looking at much higher numbers.
Why is it that you think that they keep going up and up and up? Are they showing any signs of slowing?
So we see in the figures today that Scotland and Northern Ireland haven't seen another steep rise this year. So that's encouraging. We know that the steep rises that we've seen since the pandemic have been caused by changes to drinking patterns that happened during the pandemic. So people in isolation, people trying to cope with the stress of that situation. We know that there was people who were already drinking at heavy levels who increased their consumption, and we think that that's what we're seeing in these figures, is people have kind of tipped over the edge into really serious health harm.
What are the differences in that time?
We know that we have some preventative policies in place in Scotland that are mitigating the effect that we are seeing here. So we think that's why we're not seeing the same steep rises that you're seeing elsewhere in the UK. The main one being minimum unit pricing, which we know pre-pandemic had already started to drive down our levels of alcohol deaths.
And as an organisation, what is your main focus? Is it introducing these measures?
The evidence is really clear from across the world that the things that work to reduce consumption are action on price, restrictions on marketing and restrictions on availability. So we've been advocating for those things for years now, and the Scottish Government does have a strategy that comprises components of all of those things. The problem is that we haven't seen them all come into force at the same time. Yes, we've got minimum unit pricing, but we still don't have marketing restrictions. We still haven't had good controls on availability. So we're saying that we really need to move faster with those preventative measures. But now that we're in this situation where we've got so many people dying, so many people needing hospital support, we're also saying we need an emergency response specifically to that to address the deaths.
In a statement, the Portman Group, which represents the alcohol industry, said that the rise in alcohol deaths highlights the urgent need to focus policies that will help more harmful drinkers. Meanwhile, the Scottish Government said Public Health Scotland has been commissioned to review the evidence on alcohol marketing. Still to come, we have weather with Chris, but first it's the sport with Lewis tonight.
Thank you very much, Laura. Hello there. Yes, one match in the Premiership this evening. That's the rearranged clash between Celtic and Dundee. And we've got the team news in. And the big one for Celtic fans is that Jota starts for the first time since returning to the club. Two other changes, Alistair Johnston and Arnie Engels there, have also come into the starting lineup. Well, as for Dundee, they also make three changes from that 6-0 defeat to Hearts. Lyle Cameron, who's just signed a pre-contract with Rangers, is one of those sitting out. And you can get more ahead of that game on the BBC Sport website. Now, the Scotland players are in a very good place and full of belief that they can end their long wait for a win over Ireland, according to scrum coach Peter de Villiers. Scotland's last win over the Irish came 8 years ago, but ahead of Sunday's Six Nations showdown at Murrayfield, there's plenty of confidence in the camp.
You have to grow as a team, and that growth sometimes comes over time, believing in it and making sure for 80 minutes you get everything in every department right, because that is what Ireland tend to do, as they are very consistent in all different areas of play. So that firstly is going to be important, and then secondly is the belief, going out there and really believing that we're going to go and do it. And I think the players are all in a good place with regards to that.
Now to boxing, and this man here is looking to become the British super flyweight champion this weekend. Matty McHale trains at the same Edinburgh club as former undisputed world champion Josh Taylor, and he's coached by Terry McCormack, the man that helped Taylor on his way to the top. Sheila McLaren has been speaking to him as he gets ready to take on England's Brandon Dayord.
It's so exciting because you dream about it when you're a kid, you watch people do it, you used to go to events like these yourself, and now it's you doing it. It's all surreal, to be honest, but you can't let that distract you. You just need to put on a show for everybody coming out to spend their hard-earned money on you. So work hard and put on a show for everybody, yeah.
There's a few kind of well-kent faces, I suppose, in your gym, Josh Taylor, Lee McGregor. How much have they helped you develop as a boxer? Well,
Josh is in the gym. He's helped out a lot, just for this camp as well, he's just given me wee insights, things, piece of advices, and he's been really good with me. So it's been nice to have him about the gym, helping out. Yeah, everything's going well at the minute.
I mean, you see what he's gone on to achieve. I take it that makes you want to get there.
Absolutely. That's everybody's kid's dream to go on. If not, go to the Olympics, but obviously that didn't happen. Commonwealth Games, that happened. And then you see Josh Taylor, you see what gym he came from, the same one as me, to be undisputed champion of the world. That's every kid's dream. You know, let's take it one step at a time. I want to get that British title, so yeah.
What would that mean for you, and what would that mean for your career, do you think?
Oh, I mean, the world, you know, that's the one fight you start watching a lot of the domestic fights. The British title is the one that everybody wants. I think it's one of the nicest looking belts there is out there, one of the most prestigious belts out there. So yeah, to get that around my waist on February 8th would be a dream come true.
And will you have a big Leith crowd here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads coming out, and hopefully make some noise, take off the roof, yeah.
So you've got Terry as your coach. What does he do for you?
You know, just everything, like the way he trains me, he's been about it all, the experience he brings and can pass on to me is just phenomenal, really. And you know, I'm very grateful to be in the position I'm in, to have him as a coach, and for him to only be my coach. You know, he's not focused on any other professional boxers, it's all me, and you know, it's a bit selfish, but I'm very grateful to be in that position.
And that fight is live on BBC Scotland on Saturday night. And for more, you can head to the BBC Sport website. You can follow live text of that clash between Celtic and Dundee tonight. There's also commentary on BBC Sounds there too. And of course, Laura, just to cover all bases, there's highlights on Sportscene later tonight as well at 20 to 11, so you can get it all.
Oh, you've done a good job tonight, Lewis. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, 5 years ago, the Scottish Government promised to ensure that all children growing up in care are loved, safe and respected. It said it would achieve that by 2030, but a new report published today warns that despite some progress, not enough has been done. Earlier, I spoke to David Anderson, who's part of the watchdog responsible for today's report. He said one of the biggest issues facing cared for people is housing.
There was a housing crisis announced by the government a year ago. Now they've targeted this, and I imagine they believe that what they're doing is enough. But what our report finds is we don't share that analysis, and that they need to really focus efforts and quickly on this area to ensure that young people are not being placed in unsuitable accommodation, that they're not being given accommodation and then becoming homeless because there is no support available. So this is one of the areas that we think things have went too slow. We heard yesterday John Swinney speak about funding for the charity and voluntary sector. Short-term funding doesn't work. We've highlighted this before, we've highlighted it again. We heard him commit to some change. It's an initial 45 organisations, I believe, but that needs to be ramped up and spread across the sector. And when they do have funding, it should be distributed quickly to where it's needed. Much of caring is simple. They just need that security of funding to continue to do the good job that they do.
So what positive steps have been made?
So if we look at the recent bill enacted at Parliament, which has stopped under-18s being imprisoned, I mean, we feel that was too slow. It should have happened before, but we do recognise that the hard work that's brought that across the line, and it's now in law, so we must make sure that now that those young people are well supported in other places to make sure that they can get the help that they need. We've seen a more standardised allowance for foster carers that's coming in. That's good news, but we also need you know, a campaign to attract foster carers, because when there's not enough foster carers, that makes it difficult for social workers to find families for children, and for foster placements. When social workers are under pressure, you know, they don't get the support they need. So, you know, everything's connected, and we really need to see some more actions. We need government and local authorities to come together to make the plan together so that they can act that plan.
What are the implications if the target is not met?
Well, we know that because historically we've seen that care experienced people are overrepresented in the prison population and the homelessness population. I always have that in my head. I asked you know, those responsible with their hands on the levers of power, what if that was your child Do you think the current system is good enough? And if the answer is no, then you must redouble your efforts to make sure that these children get the support as and when they need it. We recognise the good work that's happened, but we say that the pace must increase.
David, thank you very much for giving us your time on the programme. David Anderson there,
thank you very much.
It's not all bad news, though. Holly Robertson runs groups at Aberdeenshire schools where children are brought together to experience activities like filmmaking, skiing, art and music. She said it's made a huge difference to many young people.
We've got school refusers who come in for Promise Group, engage beautifully, and actually by the end are looking to engage more with school life and even the community life as well. So it's really quite life-changing stuff. These young people may have experienced lots of different moves. They may have experienced lots of uncertainty in their lives. So actually, having people around them that are consistent and that are invested and involved and really care are so important for them to have confidence, to have resilience, to grow up and feel loved, like they matter. That is so incredibly important.
Holly Robertson speaking there. Well, the Scottish Government said since 2022, more than £110 million has been invested to increase whole family support. On housing, they said supporting children in temporary accommodation will remain a focus for 2025, including support for care leavers and young people. Well, Chris is here with our weather this evening. I didn't get out much today, but these pictures make it look like it was a stunning day.
It was, and more of the same tomorrow, Laura,
good.
Actually, yes. Let me show you some of the top pics
from
our weather watchers today. A lovely picture from this morning across the Aberdeenshire coast there. Beautiful sea spray and that sun coming up. And a bit breezy around parts of the west and northwest, but still the blue sky. There were a few showers, but rainbows are still quite pretty, aren't they? More in the way of sunshine tomorrow, though. How do we get there? Let's take a look. It's all down to high pressure, and it is sticking with us through the next few days. Its orientation changes, it sort of shifts north, and that means the wind direction will change. But at least tomorrow, lots of sunshine, and then we'll start to see increasing amounts of cloud as we approach the weekend. But the weather fronts are held at bay. First thing tomorrow, it's a chilly start. There'll be some areas of low cloud, mist and fog. Those could linger through Dumfries and Galloway. It's a cold start, 1 or 2 Celsius through the central lowlands, perhaps down close to freezing still across the northeast. More of a wind around the west coast through the Hebrides and the Northern Isles. The temperatures here not quite as low. Now, as we head through the course of the day tomorrow, we hold on to those dry and fine conditions. That low cloud tending to dissipate, and temperatures by afternoon 7 or 8 Celsius. Still breezy around the west coast, so perhaps a touch milder here. Looking ahead towards Friday, the high pressure is still with us, but now the winds are more east-southeasterly. There will be some areas of mist and fog through central Scotland on Friday morning. Again, that could be slow to lift, but it should. And then many areas having a dry day and a fine day. But with the winds coming off the North Sea, a little more cloud across eastern parts and temperatures beginning to tumble, 5 to 7 Celsius. Take a look beyond that, though, because temperatures will be falling further. This is Saturday, more in the way of cloud around with that breeze coming in off the North Sea. 3 degrees in Inverness under the cloud, and that's not going to feel very pleasant at all. Elsewhere, around about 5. On the extended outlook, you can see that high pressure pushing up towards Scandinavia. There's those east winds bringing in a rather cool feel off the North Sea and a little more cloud around as well. So it's still largely dry on Sunday, but for many it will be a cloudier picture with the best of the sunshine in the west, temperatures 5 to 7 Celsius. And beyond that, into next week, you can see on Monday quite a lot of cloud pushing in off the North Sea. Still largely dry, I have to add. Temperatures, though, 5 or 6 Celsius at best. However, tomorrow, lots of sunshine to come, blue sky, but you can see that temperature trend as we're going towards next week. That's the forecast, Laura.
Thank you very much, Chris. Cold, we can take that, but it's the dry thing that I'm very much looking forward to.
And the sunshine.
And the sunshine, we'll take that. Thank you very much. That's all we have time for this evening. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place with your news at 7. From all the team, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye for now.